Matt, was there a moment in your life where you knew you wanted to be a filmmaker?
There wasn't one exact moment in my life when I realized, oh, this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It was sort of a culmination of events and experiences. Going through college, like many people, you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? What am I good at? How can I put myself to, put my talents to best use? And it was one of those things where, I took a screenwriting class, I took a introduction to film class, and started kind of looking back at my life and some of the things that I did and my own writing, my own, talents and things that I was interested in, and realized, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. Maybe this is somewhere that I can actually, make a career out of it. This is, I didn't even think about, oh, you can actually make a career as a writer, as a director. And once that started hitting, it became sort of like, I'm sure for many people, an obsession, and, just constantly just immersing myself in the world of filmmaking as much as possible, learning, practicing, and kind of taking that journey to, becoming a filmmaker.
When you told your parents that you wanted to be a filmmaker, what were their thoughts on that?
When I told my parents that I was interested in being a director, they definitely were kind of like, wait, is that a real job? You know what I mean? So they were kind of curious, can you make a career out of this? Can you make a living off of this? Like, how is this possible? And once I went to film school, they started seeing my projects. They noticed that, oh, okay, so this is what you do. Because I come from a background where, my dad's an engineer, my mom was a nurse, very sort of practical career choices. So when they kind of, when they finally saw that, oh, you get paid to write and direct movies, like, okay, that seems cool, that seems fun. And then it was funny is, for years I was directing features, like independent films, and doing writing assignments and scripts, and they were always like, oh yeah, you're a director, yeah, that's cool. But I never worked with really huge big name talent before. So finally this year it's funny, I finally worked with Bruce Willis on a couple movies, and when my dad found out, he's like, like John McClane? I'm like, yeah, John. And he's like, oh, now he's like, okay, so you made it as a director. And I was like, yeah, I was kind of there for the last, few years, but, it's just now that, they see it. So it's kind of cool.
Was that important to them to have their sort of blessing and not go into law or medicine or become an engineer?
I think no matter what I would have done, the good thing is my parents definitely were supportive of that. They helped me out a lot. They kind of, they were there for me when I needed them. And there was these, because the thing is, in your career, you're always going through ups and downs, no matter what, especially towards success. It's never a straight line upward. There's always those little breaks, and then a bigger break, and then a stumble, and then you sell a script, and then you think you're going to be on set, and then the financing falls through, and then you get another movie greenlit, but then it doesn't turn out the way you thought, and you thought it was going to get into Sundance, and it didn't get into Sundance, and then now it's just released on some VOD platform, and you're like, okay, that was an interesting learning lesson. Let's go on to the next project. So, and through that, I don't think you could survive as a filmmaker unless you have that sort of like friends, family, parents who are helping you and kind of helping push you and promote you and being there to motivate you.
Do you like that challenge? There's some people, they want sort of this roadmap that's just, they know like point A is going to lead to point B. But I think some people like puzzles, and they like to be able to figure things out, especially if something's almost like you can't do it, Look,
it's interesting. Obviously, if I hit the lottery, when I was, a young filmmaker, and, you could get discovered and you did an amazing short film, and then next thing you know, you're on a big budget studio film, and then, because that happens, right? That does happen where, you get discovered quickly off of a short or a script, and then 6 months later, you're on set shooting it, and then next thing you know, you're a studio filmmaker, and that does happen. So it's there, but at the same time, you have to realize that those sort of exceptional stories aren't exactly what is going to happen to you. So you have to kind of gear yourself and prepare yourself for, yeah, it'd be cool if it happens, if I shoot a short or write a cool script and, it propels forward in an interesting way. But if not, you're going to have to grind. You're going to have to keep doing it. You're going to have to keep shooting, keep writing, keep producing, keep getting yourself out there. And that's a part of the process, is that persistence. You have to be persistent. I mean, that's the one thing that I've seen in my career as a filmmaker and as a director, is the ones that are persistent, even after failure, even after a little success, or even after a big success, they stay at it. They just keep going. They keep trying, pick themselves up and do it again, try again. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh wait, it's been a few years now, I'm on set doing another movie. Like, you know what I mean? So that's what you have to do. You have to keep motivated and keep persistent.
What does success look like to you?
I think the definition of success is different for different people. For me, it was always just being able to have a sustained career as a director. And for me, it was never, oh, until I'm directing a $100 million movie with Tom Cruise, I'm not successful. Like, you got to look at it as people are looking to, as a filmmaker, as a director, they trust you, they look at your work and they find somebody who they trust as a voice, and they give you the opportunity to tell a story, right? So for me, it was always, success was always getting to that point where I can make a living being a director, being a filmmaker, and getting people to pay me to do what I love, which is tell stories, create emotions, create interesting imagery, and entertain audiences.
What about having a paycheck, but then the creative control might not be what one would think, and being able to reconcile that?
Yeah.
And say, okay, I'm actually doing what so many people come here to do or whatever, and they don't actually get to do it. I get to do it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. But now I'm just doing other people's work.
Yeah. Well, I feel like having complete creative control on your work is something that you have to earn. It takes a lot to get to that place. It takes a while to build yourself up as a director, as a filmmaker, to where people trust that every creative choice that you're going to make is going to be something that will be successful. So I think as a director, I've always, it's a collaborative experience regardless, but being able to get to that place where, you either get final cut, or you're the one who's able to make all the final decisions, creative decisions on larger projects. I think that is something that, getting to that place is something you can aspire to, but you have to go into it knowing that that's not where we start as directors or as filmmakers. It's a collaborative medium. You have to step in there thinking that, okay, I have to, the people that are with me here are all trying to do the same thing. Tell a good story, make a good movie, or shoot a good show, or shoot a good video. So you have to go into it remembering that, okay, everyone here is here for the same reason, and we're gonna all work together to get to that.
How did you get hired to direct Game of Assassins?
Game of Assassins was a film that I worked on with a producing partner from USC. So that's one of the great things about making relationships with people as you're progressing in your career. Those people that you're with, whether it's with film school or whether it's the people you meet right out of film school or just through festivals, those sort of relationships foster work. And that's the brilliant thing about, when they say work leads to work and this town's all about relationships, that's what they mean. They mean that the people that you keep in touch with and who are working their way up in the industry with you, they will be the ones that will be like, hey, I got financing finally to do a movie. Do you want to direct it? And you're like, hell yeah, let's do it. So it was one of those kind of things, those relationships where you meet somebody, you kind of do something a little small together, and then a year or two later, that relationship blossoms into something bigger.
How do you research the industry, and how much time do you spend on it?
I feel like the best way to research the industry or that you want to work in film is by meeting people in the industry, getting to know the people, because that's really what it comes down to, is the people in the industry and the people that you meet and the friendships that you make. Trying to read a book about how it is to be a writer or a director or a filmmaker is never going to really give you that sort of visceral, right there kind of experience of what it is. And you can do it as much research as you want. You can listen to other people and talk to them and do it. But once you actually kind of make those relationships, start doing it, that's when it'll start to crystallize. And you're like, oh, that one thing I heard that this filmmaker used to always say about, you know, shooting these kind of films or these kind of experiences, it finally starts crystallizing for you. So that's the best way, and it's really the only way to do it.
When you wake up in the morning, are you like going to the trades online and Box Office Mojo or whatever, and just trying to see what's hot, keep a pulse on things? Or is that something you're too busy because you're preparing for production or editing, whatever?
I think there is that sort of balance where you do want to keep the pulse on what's going on, right? You want to know, you know, the world we're living in and what's happening. But I think one of the pitfalls of being in the industry is we have this little bubble that we're in. So everyone in Hollywood thinks they know what the rest of the world wants, right? But if they're living in this little bubble, they don't realize that no, there's people in middle America or all over the country or all over the world that really don't care what this little bubble has to say or has to do. So I think it's good to stay in touch, to know what's happening in the industry, but at the same time, you have to broaden your horizons, and it's much more important to know what the world is doing, what's going on outside of Hollywood or LA and California and Los Angeles, so that the stories that we tell and the movies that we make and the content that we make resonates with the people that we want it to, right?
Is there a way to do that now without becoming too controversial or political? Is there a way to tell a universal story?
Yeah, I feel like stories, no matter what they are, they're, as long as you're tapping into those sort of universal themes, the hero's journey, and those thematic elements that all cultures and civilizations and peoples deal with on a daily basis, the stories will resonate, right? You don't need to find what new Twitter trend is causing controversy. Like, oh, let's make a story about this controversial Twitter trend, right? Those things date really fast. They're things that date quickly, and people want stories that they can kind of universally go to. And, you know, what does it mean to be, you know, a girl that becomes a woman going through that adolescence? Or what does it mean to be a father and teach his son? Or, you know, these sort of like universal stories of humanity that we've had for thousands of years, those haven't changed, right? So as long as your stories are dealing with those sort of elements, people will latch onto them and they will resonate with them.
You have 2 movies coming out that star Bruce Willis. So how did that happen?
Yeah, sometimes when people kind of ask me like, oh, you just did, you know, 2 movies with Bruce Willis, you know, starring, they think it just happened overnight or is one of those things that like, you know, that just kind of hit. But, you know, as a filmmaker, I've been grinding and doing it for more than a decade, right? I mean, I went to film school a while ago, and, you know, I've been telling stories, writing scripts, making movies. So to some people, it feels almost like this overnight thing, but no, I've been at this for a while, and it's taken a while to get to that point where my work is established enough where people will come to me and be like, oh, we want you to direct this film, or, you know, we've seen your work and we feel like your style, your vision would really fit into the content that we're creating. And that's how those films came about is, you know, I did several independent films that got a lot of buzz, a lot of attention, and they attracted producers who were like, oh, hey, we're doing these other movies. Are you interested? We'd love to hear your take on them. And it's a process. It's like a job interview, right? Like you go in there and you read the script and you come up with your vision for how you think that film should be directed.
Can we hear more about this pitch?
Yeah, as a director, when you're going to direct a script from another writer or like a studio project or production company has, you have a certain freedom to kind of read the script and come up with your vision for it. And that includes everything from a lookbook to cast to how you think the world is designed and looked and the visuals and everything. Just every little detail that you can go in there with describing how you think that film should be made. And it's everything from, you know, we're going to use a lot of Steadicam, we're going to use handheld, we're gonna use these kind of lenses. We're gonna develop this sort of arc with the characters, and it's going in there with a confident vision of how you think that film should be translated from the script to the screen. And that's really what what you're doing as a director. When you read someone else's script, you're taking that and you're sort of deciphering how you think the best version of that film should be made.
How was it to have this production company that worked with Bruce, or there was another company that knew the company that worked with him, approach you, and did you feel like you were validated? Like, okay, now this is like a real filmmaking thing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like it was being able to get approached to direct a script from another writer that has, A-list talent like Bruce Willis attached is definitely sort of whoa, this is finally, a little validation of my work as a filmmaker, that people are trusting me with telling this story. So it was definitely, it elevated the level of, okay, the stakes are really high on this one. I really have to step it up and make sure that, I really kind of bring in 100% of my passion and all the knowledge and experience that I've learned as a filmmaker, an independent filmmaker for the last decade about, okay, how do you tell an interesting story? How do you, incorporate elements of indie filmmaking, which is kind of like that fast-paced, quick shooting style into a project where you have a little bit more money to play with, but knowing that, okay, that doesn't mean that, you can get wild with it, right? I mean, there's still those parameters of it's got to come in under schedule, under budget, and you want to be able to deliver the film so that people are always asking you for the next one.
And sorry, did they sign on for both movies, or was it one
No,
and the other?
No, do one, and then
okay.
And that's part of the experience, right? Is like, and that's one of the things that's one of the lessons that you learn as a filmmaker throughout your career is, and I've said it time and time again, is work leads to more work. So you do a project, you write a script for someone, and then they're like, oh, hey, we're looking for a director to direct this other project that we have. We really liked your script, Matt, and that other film that you did. Would you like to read this script and give us your take on the project? So that's one of those things that both as a filmmaker and everyone in the industry, like you work with a DP, he'll make a film, he might meet with a producer who will hire him on a film that he ends up directing. Or, you work with an actor and the film might turn out to be really bad, but that actor was really incredible in the film, right? So you end up hiring him again on a different film. Or that's really that's so much of this industry, and so much of my career as a filmmaker has been just one project leading to the next in terms of the relationships within that project and the people you meet and the friends you make and the collaborations that happen leading to the next thing.
What was the emotion like when you found out you got was it the first one?
Yeah, and it was definitely the emotion that I felt as soon as I realized I was going to be directing, this film with Bruce Willis, was a lot of excitement. I was just kind of like, whoa, I better step it up. You know what I mean? Like I can't screw this up. I got to do the best I can. So it was sort of like that nervousness mixed with, motivation, drive, more dedication. Like, okay, I got to step it up and do what I can to tell the best story possible and direct the best film possible within the constraints that I've been given. And I follow sort of like, for me, I've learned to have more of a stoic reaction in my career to things. And I think that is what enabled me to have a sustained sort of career, is when bad things happen, you have to be able to kind of look at it from a stoic mentality of, okay, that sucks, but we're going to keep going. And then when something really amazing happens, like you're going to get to do, or you got this cool thing or whatever, great, I love that. That's good. Let's keep going. Let's keep moving. So it's having that balance where you can kind of not let it take you either one direction or another is one of those things that I learned earlier on, just reading about like Stoic philosophy and how Stoicism helps people in their careers. And it's something that goes back, to ancient Rome. And it's just something that I've learned. And even on set as a director, I try to have that sort of stoic mentality on set. Because if you have that confidence and that sort of don't let the little things that are going on set sort of drive you crazy, because they will, you know what I mean? If you let either the highs or the lows hit you, then you'll lose that sort of control, and you want to be able to just go into it confident, almost like a chess match. Just go in there with confidence, knowing that as things hit you, you can just keep going, take the hit, or then, you know, something great happens and like, okay, this is great, enjoy that little second of it, and then just keep going. Don't let that thing don't ride that high to the point where it, you know, you forget what's in the present, what's in the moment, what's happening now. So that's really been my best bit of advice, is to kind of like internalize that stoic philosophy in your career.
What does your tattoo mean?
Oh, this tattoo is actually a tattoo that I got when I did my film in China. Like I shot a film in China, and it was a kind of a crazy experience. It was just being in a foreign country and directing a film at a very young age. I was only 26 then. I was directing my second feature. So it was a challenging thing to embark at that young of an age and with a lot of responsibilities, and we survived. So, you know, I felt like I needed to get something to symbolize that survival thing. And what it is, it's a quote from The Art of War. And it says, whatever happens in life, you will always be victorious. So,
nice.
I believe the Mandarin is like Shan Wabu Shan.
Oh, okay. Do you speak Mandarin?
No.
Or Taiwanese?
I learned a few words, but that's about it. That's all I know.
Okay. Okay, very cool. How was it to be on that set as such a young director? Did you feel at times that you really had to adopt, as you said earlier, that stoic mentality because people challenged you? Maybe you were a threat. Maybe they thought, what does this guy know? He's so young.
Yeah.
And you had to really kind of like prove yourself, but also show that their daggers didn't affect you.
Yeah, I feel like because I've had the fortunate success earlier in my career when I was younger to direct a couple features, and I was 22 when I did the first one, and then 26 when I did the other one. And,
wow.
You know, so it was, you know, I was young when I made those movies, and there's both pros and cons to being that young directing films. And one of them is you don't have the experience yet, and you need to kind of get those life experiences to understand, okay, you know, the human relationships and the stories, and there's always challenges that happen in terms of, you know, being that young and having to kind of command the respect of a lot of people that are a lot older than you, and kind of just being able to stay focused on your vision, and as challenges come your way, you don't have that life experience yet where you can fall back on a trust of, oh, okay, this has happened to me before. It's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. So it's just one of those things. And even myself as a producer, I would hesitate to hire a director who is, you know, a first-time director. I mean, it's the idea of like, oh, this girl or this guy has never directed a film. Ooh, that's a risk, because you never know what's going to happen. There's always that question mark. And until they've proven themselves, can you say like, okay, yeah, it worked. They were able to step up to the plate. They were able to accept the challenge, and they were able to execute their vision as close as they could within the limitations and parameters of filmmaking, which is you're never going to get 100% of what you want, because there's never infinite money or infinite days or a perfectly cast movie where everyone's having like the village of the happy people, or everybody gets along, you know what I mean? That's just not how movie making is. There's always personalities, people, budgets, schedules. There's the logistical challenges of making a movie or making a show are always going to cause conflicts. So no matter what, you're going to have to be able to trust yourself as a director to tell a story and create as close as you can the final product to that crazy idea you had, that vision that you had at the beginning. And as close as you can get it is kind of the goal.
So sorry, you were 26 when you went to mainland China to shoot this?
Yeah.
What do you think they saw in you aside from your work that they said, I can trust him? Because brilliant work is great, but that's a lot.
Well, I feel like, talking about relationships again, and the people that you worked with, once again, those were producers who I had met and worked with after USC. So we had that built-in sort of relationship, and that's why I was saying building relationships, building friendships in the industry with people who are like-minded, and developing those relationships over the course of your career are really what will afford you those sort of opportunities, because you're never going to get some random person like, oh, let me trust you to, for $5 million. Yeah, go ahead, go do it. No, they're going to need to be able to say like, oh yeah, we did that, $200,000 music video or short or script or whatnot, and we kind of killed it. So let's step it up again and do something bigger. And that's how a lot of those opportunities happen, is those relationships develop and mature and the opportunities come.
What would your advice be for a young director? Maybe it's not their first time, but they're being put in a situation that's super impressive, but they're also going to another country where they may not be familiar with the language, the customs, and they know they have this huge responsibility. They don't want to show they're nervous, but
yeah,
they're terrified maybe.
Well, it's funny is I also, one of the Bruce Willis movies that we just did, we did that in Puerto Rico. So I got to go to Puerto Rico as well. And that's the beauty really about being a filmmaker sometimes, is we get to travel, we get to go to different places, we get to experience new cultures. And you have to realize as a director that the culture of the country you're in affects the way that the crews are and the crews work. And the hierarchies are a little different. The AD might be a little different in one country in terms of how they communicate to the crew versus how it is in where you're used to, right? So I remember in Puerto Rico, one interesting thing that I noticed was the crews there love like enjoying life, which is great. But every time we'd break for lunch, music was playing, people were dancing, having fun, and I was like, whoa, we got to go back to work. I was like, this is different, but you kind of feel it out. And you're like, okay, this is what the culture here, this is how they work, right? This is how people here work, and we get stuff done. So what does it matter, right? I mean, it's just how things are made here. And, maybe some of the set etiquette is different in terms of who talks to what and how these kind of things go down. But you have to trust your instincts as a director, and when you get to set, sort of being able to decipher those things as they're happening is really all you can do. I mean, you can ask questions, you can learn, you can kind of research like we talked about, but ultimately it comes down to getting there and doing it, and that's the only way you can actually kind of decipher it.
What makes a great story?
I think what makes a great story is different in a film than it is in a novel or a poem or another form of art. With film, it's a visual medium, but it's also auditory, and it's dealing with a narrative structure that's different from like other mediums. So to create a great story in film, it's a combination of so many things that it's almost like it's hard to even decipher it down to one thing. It comes down to these magic elements that just sometimes happen, right? It's doing as much as you can to tell an interesting story with universal themes and great acting and great cinematography and beautiful sound design and all those elements coming together to create a great story. Because I feel like you can have a great script in as a story, but the final film could not be great, or it could not gotten there. And why? Because those other elements weren't able to elevate that great script and tell that great story. So with film, it's like you have to get all those things together, deal with all the other logistics of actually shooting a movie, and sometimes let those happy accidents happen so that final product for whatever, it just all came together. Sometimes you leave a set after shooting a movie and you're like, there were some cool moments. I don't even know if we have a story that you like, did that work? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, God, that was so tough. And then you get into the editing room and you're like, whoa, that was a cool moment, or that was interesting. I never thought that take would have worked in that sort of way. So reshuffling scenes in post and kind of working all that out, you realize, oh, So that totally worked, or that was what elevated it to the next level.
So that happens a lot, I guess, then for probably many filmmakers, where you do your whatever 16-day shoot and then you have all your footage and you're driving back or whatever's happening, you're packing up the trucks and do we even have a movie here? And is that like do you think that's a common thing?
I feel like for me as a director, every time I finish a movie, it doesn't matter how amazing the experience was, there's always that niggling thing in the back of your mind where you're thinking, God, did I cover the scenes? Like, did we cover the movie? Like, did we miss any shots? Did we, was that kind of thing? I mean, there's always going to be that little niggling thing in the back of my mind, at least, where I'm not 110% sure yet until I actually get into post, work with my editor, and start piecing the pieces of the puzzle together. And that's one of the things that I've learned over my career as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, is on set, what you're trying to do is you're just trying to get little pieces of the puzzle, right? This shot will get this story, this element of the story told. This scene will be this piece of the puzzle. And it's about getting all those little pieces of the puzzle so that once you get into editing, all those like pieces kind of come together. And it's hard to know when you're done, oh, all the pieces are going to fit perfectly, right? You try to edit it in your head as much as possible, but at the same time, there's always going to be that little thing, and you have to just, you got to be confident enough to just say, okay, let's keep going. We got it. Let's do it.
So regarding action in a film, The Long Night and Trauma Center, you have a lot of action scenes. Can we talk about your preparation for those action scenes?
Directing action is definitely something that was new for me, and it was something that, I love action. I love action thrillers. So being able to get a chance to do an action movie was a lot of fun. And the preparation for that required a lot more in terms of understanding, okay, this is what's on the script. How do we best execute this with the tools that we have, with the budget that we have, with the time that we have? Because that's all it comes down to, is being able to like read what's on the page and be able to execute that. So it required a lot of storyboarding, a lot of shot listing, a lot of in-depth conversations with the stunts and the VFX, and saying, okay, what can we get away with, or what do you think in terms of, okay, we got a car chase happening. How do we execute this car chase in 4 hours, and we only have one camera on a Russian arm? How do we pull this off, right? So it's kind of digging into the people around you, your collaborators, and who have done it before, so that you can kind of see, oh, okay, this is what this is going to be able to do, and this is what this is going to be able to. And for me, an action scene has to serve a narrative purpose in the story. So you can't just have a blind action, just because it's a cool action scene, let's just blow something up, or let's just have a fist fight to have a fist fight. Even a car chase in a movie has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and it has to have that narrative thrust. Otherwise, it's just a random car commercial, two cars just skidding through a road, right? So I always sit down there and challenge myself and say, okay, if we cut this action scene out, what are we going to lose? And if we're going to lose something, then like, okay, we need this action scene because our character has a definite goal in this action scene, and he's achieving that goal, and the antagonist is, for whatever reason, blocking that goal, right? So it always comes down to that, and understanding how this action scene is going to propel the story forward.
What's the hardest part of making a movie, and why?
That's an interesting one. I think the hardest part about making a film is the logistics. Sometimes it's those unknowable things that you have no control over, and being able to, it doesn't matter if it's a $100 million movie or a $200,000 feature, there's always going to be things that come up where you don't have control over them, right? So, and that's just the nature of what we do, is we're taking a camera and we're pointing it at real people in real situations, and things in real life kind of always, like, things happen, right? I mean, this actor isn't available, or they're in the, thing going on, the light's not working, the sun is setting, we're losing our light, the sound isn't what we thought, like there's loud sounds here. So there's these unknowable things that are always coming at you as a director, and you have to be able to filter out the ones that are going to require your attention and the ones that you have to kind of just move on from. So I think that's that's one of those things that you can't really learn. You have to experience and kind of have that sort of thing in your belt where this situation has happened to you before, where the sun is setting and you have 5 shots to get on your shot list, and crap, okay, how do we get this scene in 1 shot now because the sun is setting? And that's when you're thinking as an editor and you're saying, okay, the previous scene we did this and there was a shot where our character walked from here to here. You know what? I don't really need to get that transition moment. Let's just go straight into him. He's in the room, and it's being able to be nimble on your feet and make those adjustments and make those cuts in your head so that you don't lose your whole day. So that, you know, when the producers come up to you and say, did you get the scene? You can say confidently, we got the scene. It cuts together. It works.
And is that where the sort of monk-like stoicism comes into play? Because like that, I'm sure that sounds like you could panic too. You could go either way on that one. Yeah,
definitely. Those are those situations where you have to not let the outside distractions kind of pull you away from what your goal is as a director, which is you got to sit behind the monitor. And this is one word of advice I got when I was in film school was ultimately the director is the ideal audience for a film. So when they're sitting behind that monitor or they're sitting next to the camera, watching the actors, looking at the scene, you got to look at it as the perspective of an ideal audience member and be like, that worked, or that's going to require one more, or how is that going to cut to the next thing, right? Or as a storyteller, you're kind of putting yourself in that position and you're looking at it from that perspective. So being able to just turn off everything around you, all the noise, and just being able to, for that moment where you call action and cut, that little in between, just being able to look at it as an audience member, that ideal audience member, and just taking it all in, I think is critical to being able to tell your story.
When should someone quit their day job to become a full-time filmmaker, director?
That's an interesting question. I think that's always a challenge, is because I've had to work with that challenge as well. Is like, when do you quit your day job and focus just on your passions, directing, writing, producing, whatever it is? And it's funny, is early on in my career, you know, I was lucky. I said I was, you know, young, and I got to direct a couple movies before the age of 26, and then it was like 2009, 2010, and then the whole economic recession happened, and, you know, trying to maintain myself as a director, filmmaker at that time was challenging, right? So I had to get a day job. I started doing, you know, things not even related to filmmaking. I got a day job in the tech field. So I was doing like QA software testing for companies for a few years. And I was doing that until, you know, a few years ago, where I was like, okay, like this is fine. Like I'm starting to sell scripts again. I just did another film. I got an agent now. I got a manager. I can focus more on this path. So and that's why I've said it so many times to other aspiring filmmakers and directors, is your career is never going to be, sometimes it is. Sometimes some people are lucky and they hit it big. Somebody sees their short film, Steven Spielberg sees their short film, or James Wan sees their short, says, oh my God, get this guy a feature. And then he directs a movie with Warner Brothers. And then next thing you know, he's doing a $100 million movie. And you're like, wow, how did that person get, like, that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? But chances are your career is going to be more of that. You do something, get some attention, and then people don't really hire for anything. And then you have to start over again and do another film and write another script and then try it again. And then this time you get to work on a little bit bigger budget, and then you learn about the process more and you become a better storyteller. And then you're expecting that film is going to open Cannes or Sundance. You're like, oh, I made this incredible feature. It's so cool. It's going to get into so many festivals. And you don't get into the festivals you thought you were going to get into. So now you're saying, okay, damn, I thought I was gonna have to quit my job and you know, get a $100 million studio movie. So that's not happening now. So now I gotta, you know, get back to it and grind again, write another script. What's the type of movie that I can make? another thriller or another comedy or whatever. So what's my expertise? And you got to go back at it again and try again and shoot another one. And eventually what you'll look back on is you'll turn around, you'll look at all that process and you're like, wait a second, each one was just like a little notch up that took you up higher and higher, bigger budget, bigger talent, bigger people, more exposure. And next thing you know, suddenly you're like, oh, I don't even need a day job anymore. I can just quit and I'm making enough money doing this that I can actually have a sustained career as a filmmaker.
Was that your hardest year, the 2009 time?
Yeah, I mean, there's always been hard years and good years and successful years, and it's up and down. It's hard to say. I could have a hard year in 3 years, but that's worse than that, right? Can make a movie and critics savage me and stuff happens. Like, oh well, you know, that's the thing I've learned from other successful directors and filmmakers is they don't let that stuff get to them. They're working, they're making films, they're telling stories. They don't let other people's opinions on whether they should be making films affect them. They just do it. They're like, I'm gonna keep making movies, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what other people think of it. It's like, as long as I'm getting the opportunity, I'm gonna keep doing it. So you have to kind of be that stubborn, dog-headed person where you're saying, this gives me joy and I'm gonna keep doing what I have to do to get that.
When you were working that tech QC job or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm sure your mind wasn't totally there at times.
No, it wasn't.
You were right thinking about what's it like, you know, I could do a script about this or something, you know?
Yeah, no, it was definitely, there was times where, yeah, I mean, shit, I got fired from a couple jobs because I was like not like showing up, you know what I mean? Because I was like doing things that I, you know, showing up late and stuff. But that's the thing is, you know, you have a day job, you do it to pay the bills sometimes. Like, look, we aren't all lucky. We're not all trust fund babies, and we don't all have rich parents, or we don't inherit, you know, a lot of money. So gotta get a day job, and it's fine. Like, people, you know, throughout their careers, it's okay to have a day job where you're paying your rent, and then when you get, you know, wake up in the morning. I know I was reading this thing where Stephen King, before he was Stephen King, he worked at like a laundromat or something, right? I mean, he was waking up early at 5 a.m., writing for 10 pages, then going to work, then coming home, and then his wife was sick for a while, he was helping her, and then he'd write a little bit more, and then he'd go to sleep. That's just the reality of being an artist is, you know, we don't really have that freedom to just, you know, wake up and instantly, you know, we have access to whatever we want. We have to sometimes grind at it and kind of get ourselves there.
Was that in his book on writing?
I believe so, yeah.
Such an excellent book.
It is, right? It's great.
Because, you know, what was fascinating too is when he talked about when he, quote, made it, then he had new challenges. So right. I think that's what's like this misconception that you could be, okay, now you're without the day job, but now there's a new challenge, and that is you're keeping track of your own time, you're keeping yourself on point.
100%.
And he talked about how things got diverted a little bit, and that was sort of an eye-opener for me. I didn't know.
Yeah, no, that can happen. That's the thing is when you are actually making your art, whatever that is, whether it's writing or directing or cinematography or editing, you realize, okay, yeah, you don't necessarily have a boss telling you, gotta show up at 9 a.m. and you're leaving at 6 or whatever, but at the same time, you have to now wake up in the morning and be like, okay, you know, I'm going to create work for myself somehow, right? I mean, you might not need to do work this week because you just did a job last week, but at the same time, you have to realize, okay, yeah, you did a job last week, you directed a film, you know, for 3 months, but you never know when your next film is gonna be. It could take a while. You could be ready to go and you got another film and then it falls apart and then it's like, oh crap, how do I pay my rent next month? You know what I mean? So you have to go into that mentality of, new problems and new challenges are always going to be there, and you need to be prepared to deal with those. That doesn't mean you got to give up your passion, right? Just because you're in a day job. And sometimes it's good to have a day job in the actual industry that you're working in. So if you're a writer, it's great if your day job is reading other people's scripts, because now you're learning from other people. Or if your day job is, let's say you want to be a director, your day job is editing. So now you're editing other directors' work and you're seeing, oh, that was interesting, or he screwed that up, or she screwed that up. So seeing what other people do will definitely, during that day job, so that when you do get that opportunity, you're using all that experience.
Can you share 5 lessons that will help someone be a better filmmaker right now?
I think 5 lessons that'll make you a better filmmaker right now is, first, trust your actors. Actors are always going to come in there to try to elevate the material, to try to create better work for you. So always trust your actors. Number 2, don't get so trapped on what your vision is that you're so focused on it you can't listen to other ideas or other people, because that'll limit what you can get. Third is, don't give up. You know what I mean? If things aren't exactly going your way, that doesn't mean that there isn't something right around the corner or something that you can do to kind of get to that quicker. I think another tip is to read a lot of scripts. I think reading scripts and then watching the films that were actually made off of the scripts, you'll learn so much about how the story was actually executed. It's one thing to see a movie and be like, oh, this is how I would have done it, or this is how they should have done it. But when you read the actual material that it was based on, the blueprint itself, and then see, oh, that was interesting, the way that that director executed the scene, or the blocking in that scene was different than the way I would have blocked that scene, but that was interesting. Another bit of advice that I would give is edit projects as much as you can, because the more as a director you're on set thinking as an editor, the faster you'll be, the more concise you'll be, and the more able to get what you need on set. Is because you've spent that time in the edit bay seeing what works, seeing how cuts, takes, and work to get cut together, and elements kind of you don't need and things that you do need really helps with that. So I think cutting projects, cutting stuff on your own is really essential. And I remember one of the things that I did in film school was I would take let's say a scene from, whatever your favorite movies are, whether it's Lawrence of Arabia or The Godfather or whatever. You take those films and you take a scene, you drop it on a timeline, and you just find all the cuts for that scene, and you look at it in whatever editing program you're using, like, oh, so they cut from that to that to that. And it really is an invaluable way to see how a scene plays out, how cuts can get either shorter or faster, how the director and the editor create suspense or tension by the way that the cuts are laid out in the scene. So that was a really invaluable learning lesson, is by looking at other projects and seeing how they were cut.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Do you remember the films you used to watch again?
Oh,
like some of the ones that really stuck out where you were...
Stuck out to me, yeah. Trying to think. Okay. It's hard for me to choose 5 films or just a list of films that had a lot of, that kind of left an impression on me as a filmmaker. I think more than anything, it's, the directors themselves and their body of work that I look back on and kind of get inspiration from. Like looking at Kubrick, looking at how he was able to kind of tap into different genres like horror, the war films, and all those different genres that he touched on. How he would uniquely shoot a scene was always interesting. That would always give me inspiration. I'd be like, okay, that was a different way to shoot this scene. So I'll try to think of other directors or other filmmakers and see how at their work they might have approached a similar scene, and try to be like, oh, that's different. I never would have thought of that, but that'll kind of inspire me as a filmmaker. I mean, Kubrick, Spielberg, Kurosawa, Christopher Nolan, those are the type of filmmakers where their work is so unique and such a strong voice that anytime I need inspiration and want to just kind of draw back into that creative well, I can just look at any of their films and find something unique or different that will help motivate me and inspire me.
And speaking of chess, we talked about it earlier in the interview. Kubrick used to play chess for money, right?
Yeah.
When he was
Kubrick was he approached the filmmaking process like a chess game in a way, right? Every problem that came at him was, another move on the board, and he would always try to anticipate 2 steps ahead, other things that could happen, and chess is not just an analogy for filmmaking; it's really an analogy for life, where if you can become a good chess player, then you put your mind in that mindset, you can become a better filmmaker and then hopefully a better person, because you can kind of look at life from that perspective.
Yeah, he had a very unique way of looking at the world, a contrarian way.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. When you
definitely
hear interviews with him,
totally,
he was a very interesting guy.
Yeah, very fascinating figure.
Where does a story begin for you? Like, how do you know the beginning of one when you start writing, or even you're reading someone else's material?
For me, the beginning of a story is where you're introduced to a character and you can empathize with them. I think that's the point where the story really begins, because until you can step into the shoes of whoever your protagonist is, your story can't really start. Everything up until that point is things that you didn't necessarily need. And once that moment happens and it clicks into place, that's when you're like, okay, now as an audience member, the story begins and I'm following this character's journey, whoever they are, and seeing where it leads me.
You think of a few characters where you were able to empathize with them. Maybe they even weren't someone that if you saw them in real life, you would really empathize, but once you see that from that sort of director's perspective.
Well, I think one of the best examples, and I think why this was such a successful show, Breaking Bad, was Walter White's character. And I remember talking about, reading the script of something before you actually watch it. I remember reading the pilot for that, and it happens so quickly in that, where you step into Walter White's shoes as a character. You see the life he's leading. He's a teacher. He's got to deal with these students, and then he goes home and he has sort of like this contentious relationship with his wife, and he finds out he has cancer, and it's like, you're like, whoa, this guy's dealing with a lot of issues, and you can relate to him, right? Because who hasn't in their life, woken up one morning and feel like they're living like the worst possible version of their life, and there's all these things that are happening to them, and it's you just relate to that, right? So as soon as that happens in that story, you're already empathizing with Walter, and when he gets the opportunity to kind of break bad, as they said, you're with him, right? You want to see how far he can take this, what's going to happen to him. And I think that's the key to interesting stories, is getting you to empathize with, who your hero is, so that when things go bad, or when they're making sometimes really bad choices, you're not yelling at the screen. You're just saying, it's that he had no other, or she had no other choice to make. That was just like, they were putting these circumstances, and you're able to step into their shoes and see it from that perspective.
And it's interesting too how his character plays off the Jesse character.
Right.
Because Jesse's situation isn't as dire, and he's much more flippant and cavalier about things, whereas the stakes for Walter are much higher. He's got a son that has a disability. Yeah. And you see these bullies come in the store or whatever, and in that scene right there, you really feel the clothing store, wherever that they are, and if you were to see that normally, you think, well, this person's not a good person, but then in the context of why that happened, it makes sense. So just to see his character in these dire straits, and then played off the Jesse character, who's, just
flipping about it. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, and I think that's the reason why Walter is the protagonist of the show, is right. That's the audience perspective into this world, is that character, and you can empathize with him and see where he's coming from.
Who's been the best person you've ever worked with in Hollywood? And what was it about that individual, aside from their body of work? Maybe it was just the way they worked with people. Maybe it was how they handled themselves in pressure situations.
Wow. God, call someone out.
Oh, yeah, you don't have to even say their name.
Okay, I think the best person I've ever worked with is an actor that I got a chance to work with recently, on a project, and his name is Shea Buckner, and he was one of the best actors I've ever worked with. And what it was he came in there so prepared, with so much backstory, with so many interesting choices, that it's a dream as a director when an actor comes to you with just so many interesting ideas and so much of a fleshed out character, that person on the page where you're like, oh, this is a cool, complex character, your actor can just take it to this whole other level and just add so much to it that every line has backstory, every little nuance has some interesting subtext to it. And it challenged me as a director to step it up and tell an even better story, because you're working with these actors who really, they're committed to those characters that they're creating, right? They want their characters to feel real and have a inner life and come to life on screen. And that really it was an incredible experience to work with such a dedicated actor who just made me a better director.
So for that film, did you have a table read with the actors before?
No, God, I wish I did.
Oh, you didn't?
No, we didn't have a table read.
Okay, wow.
The tough thing about some of these movies is literally actors are cast 2 days before you're shooting, and you're like, okay, we'll see you in 2 days. So it's a challenge. You don't do a table read. Like, I've had that. I would love to have a table read, love to have rehearsals. Sometimes the nature of the beast is you don't have time to do any of those, and you have to really trust your instincts as a filmmaker and trust the actor's instincts and be able to collaborate in a way such that, you know, the work is of high quality and elevated still, even though you didn't get a chance to do rehearsals on that. And it's interesting because some directors don't even like rehearsals and they prefer not to do rehearsals. For me, and I never understood that, because for me, like, when you rehearse, it's not like you're never going to get that take again, right? I mean, I feel like people are afraid to rehearse because they think somehow they're going to get some magic and then it wasn't on camera and then they'll never be able to get something like that again. But if you're working with talented actors and you trust yourself as a director, there's no reason why you can't get another one just like that, or ideally even better than that. And that's the thing, is once you've directed enough and you've seen the contributions that an actor makes to a scene with their characters, I see now why some directors like the Finchers of the world shoot 40 takes or 30 takes. Or I would love to keep shooting, because every take, it's another layer that's added. It's something different. It's an interesting choice. Those sort of natural things start coming out. And that's why theater, you know, when you have an actor and you have a group of actors doing something every night for months on end, by the time they're done, there's so much going on that it's on another level. So anytime I hear a director say, oh, I don't like doing rehearsals, I'm like, why? I mean, every time you're doing it again, you're getting a chance to bring something else to it. You try something different. Sometimes it doesn't work, but that doesn't matter. You have another chance to try it again and do something different. So I think rehearsals are a really important part of the process. And anytime you can get afforded to get them, definitely take them and don't turn them down, because that's really where you can find those nuances and those little moments, is through rehearsing with the actors and talking them through it and finding them together.
So when he showed up on set, was it like the 6 a.m. call time or whatever?
Yeah.
And did you just know in that moment, like, oh wow, this guy is super, he's ready to go?
I mean, I think as soon as you meet an actor, I had conversations with him like the day before. So I knew, like, getting on a Skype call, I was like, okay, this person is prepared. They have a really strong take on the character, and it's really going to elevate the material. And it kind of gave me that boost of confidence and inspiration that, you know, I'm working with these individuals, these actors that are really committed to creating great work. And, you know, as a director, you come in and you do all that you can to really kind of just push the material and elevate the material. So when you do work with collaborators who come at that with that same angle, it really keeps you motivated and pushes you to keep going and to keep doing better.